So for now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce the first panel for today. The title of this panel is called Customers have become much more data-driven, resulting in less supplier engagement. How are businesses combating this in order to sustain growth? I'd like to start introducing my first panelist is Patricia Ansong, the co-founder of Brand and Bloom. Second, Marcus Cauchi, the CEO of Laugh Limited. We've got Sarah, sorry, Marcus. We've got Sarah Downs, the co-founder and director of Doqaru Limited. We've got Gavin Ingham, founder of IM10, and Christopher Neil Jones, the co-founder and CEO of ProspectSafari. Right, guys. I hear a lot of background noise. Is that from me? Okay, right. So, guys, thank you for taking the time to be with me today. Right, so I saw a report from Gartner, and it said that less than 17% of buyers actually engage with sellers before making a purchase. What is your opinion on this? What are you thinking on this? Please give me your thoughts, because I think this is actually shocking. Someone kick us off.
You want to go?
Yeah. Someone else go, because I'm bound to be massively opinionated.
Leon, I'll go. I think it's a real shame, is what I think. And it's been coming for years. And I think there's a huge amount of overemphasis on what I would call non-traditional sales strategy. It seems to me that a lot of people in today's marketplace carry a polarizing black and white filter over absolutely everything they do, from politics to sales. So it seems to be embrace the old and argue about the new, embrace the old and reject the new. And I'm kind of looking at both and going, you know, it's a little bit like choosing between jam and cream on your scone. It's not a choice, you know, it's like yum, yum, let's have both. And I think what's happened is a lot of people have taken over as sales training, sales consulting, sales delivery has become much more niche because it's needed to, and a lot more competition and a lot more going on. You have a lot of people teaching in certain areas now who never actually have gone face to face with people, who don't understand how to do those things. You've got a whole generation of people who hide behind their mobile phones. Interestingly, where is my mobile? It's here. You know, on my mobile, the bottom left down here is make a call, right? I was doing something the other day and I didn't have my phone, and I said to my niece, who's 18, oh, any chance I could borrow your phone? And she said, yeah, sure, there you go. And I took a phone and I went, where's your phone? And she went, it's on screen 3, 2, 3. And I think the issue here becomes that therefore we've got this whole group of people who are quite happy for this to happen. And then on top of that, and my final point for the moment, I think clients, because they always thought that they could do it better. So they always thought they could do better without salespeople. So they allow us, they actually want this to happen, and people often don't know what's best for them. So they allow us to do this because they think that that's what they want, and then they don't get any value from salespeople, and they say, we didn't get any value from the salespeople, but they didn't allow it.
Yeah.
On the beach.
You cut up. We didn't quite hear the last point there, but I mean, I think there's some really great points. I mean, you said here that you know.
It does become a danger of being.
Sorry, Gavin. Can we get someone else? Would somebody else like to? Yeah, go on, Marcus.
Sorry, Sarah, after you.
Okay, I'll make it quick, Marcus, because I know there's something good coming. So I think there's a few things here. I completely agree with what Gavin said on, you know, what we focus on as sellers, and, you know, hiding behind screens and hiding behind automation is not going to help this. You know, it's going to accelerate it further. But, we need to be mindful of consumer behavior, and, buyers in business are also consumers. And as a consumer, you are able to take yourself through a buying journey. If you use the TripAdvisor example, you don't walk into the travel agent anymore. You go to TripAdvisor because you have so much third-party validation at your fingertips, finding other consumers that care about the same things you do. And buyers are starting to expect that, in the B2B space as well. So, there's so much we can do to enable it, but in the right way. And I think just automating everything and hiding behind screens is not the solution. Marcus, throwing the ball over to you.
Caught it. Okay. So I think the problem is not that customers are focusing on the data. They're focusing on the wrong bits of data. I think the real value is in listening to the small data. It's the throwaway comments in the conversations that probably CS are having, because sales don't have relationships anymore, because the whole thing has been broken up. You've got marketing and different functions there, and then you've got the SDR function, and that's either outsourced or it's insourced, but to someone else that's thrown over the wall. And at every stage, the customer has become a forgotten afterthought. And what we need to do is we need to listen to the people at the margins. We need to listen to new customers. And we need to listen to why they've just changed, what's caused them to switch. That's the kind of data that we as sellers really need to be aware of, because that's the kind of data that our customers care about. And we need to focus on shifting our emphasis on this mad rush every quarter to try and scrabble around to make some ludicrous notional and temporary valuation number, in favor of focusing on the medium term. If we were looking at the data, for example, of who our customers or our prospects were already partnering with, and we were using that data in order to engage with people who are trusted by both the customer and us, and being hand-delivered to the customer at multiple points in their organization. That would be the smart way to use your data. But at the moment, it just seems to be this mad rush and there's this obsession with more is better. It's not. More is more. Better is better. And we forget that the consumer is the innovator. I have to credit Bob Mester, one of the geniuses that I'm delighted to be connected with for that. The person who's at the sharp end, you need to speak to them. That's where the real value is. And you need to speak to them not when you want to transact to hit your quota. You need to speak to them months or even years before. And we have to shift our focus. So I'm just going to shut up now.
I think, Marcus, that was a really great point. Would you then argue that networking is the new form of selling?
Yes-ish. I would go deeper than that. I think what we've forgotten is that humanity's greatest superpower is our ability to cooperate. It's not my terrifying fangs and claws. Rishi Sunak staring across to whoever Lev the Russian is and terrifying him with his terrifying stare. That's not what got us to the top of the food chain. It's not my ability to run away from predators, definitely. I'm pretty much first on the menu. It's our ability to cooperate and then look at problems together. And this is where the real value is in the data. It's not in these vanity metrics and these obsessive, this obsession with stuff that doesn't matter. The over measurement and overemphasis of stuff that's just irrelevant and basically makes the customer a forgotten afterthought and burns employees out. See no point in it, but that's just an old duffer talking.
All right. That's great. Chris and Patricia, you've been. I would like to give you a chance to speak before we move on to the next section.
Yeah. Certainly, I mean, I agree 100% with what Marcus is just saying. When I've done an awful lot of workshops for account planning for large strategic accounts for some of the very big guys, Cisco, IBM, HP, their biggest accounts, 20, 40 million a year. So hugely complex. And the thing that's always missing when we analyze what's going wrong in any one account is joining the dots, asking the questions of the customer and listening to the response. There's a huge amount of information there, to Marcus's point, but you're not listening to it. You're not reacting to it. And the salespeople tend to be focused because they need to hit their numbers at the end of the month. They're focused on their projects and things that they perceive or understand to be relevant to that project. They're not interested in the stuff that their customer is obsessed with, which isn't their project. It's other tangential things. And simply by opening up and asking questions about that, you gather a huge amount of information that turns out to be useful. And this is not theoretical. You know, we measure the results at the end of every single one of those workshops, and we know the turnaround that there can be within 6 months of doing this. And it's not rocket science. It's just asking the questions and listening. And, you know, in facilitating those workshops, my role is really to point out the gaps in their information, the things they don't understand about their customers, and therefore to ask questions to their customer about that. So it's networking within the customer in that example, and gleaning information that you didn't realize was of primary importance, if you like, to your particular project, but it's certainly important to your customer. So and as we move, you know, that's with very large, very big organizations. We've done a lot of research on SMEs as well as to what's important to them. And, you know, there the selling process is less complex, but the same principles apply. You need to be engaging and you need to be listening. So any idea that you can do all of this by some sort of sales technology, automation, AI, sending out information that's masquerading as human being, it ain't going to do it. You need to be talking to these people and learning from them. The question then becomes, well, I can't do that with every single one of my large number of prospects. So the answer is you've got to filter those prospects down. You've got to stream them into different pipelines and put some onto a drip campaign and others you're calling and engaging with. And it amazed us to find in our research that the majority, roughly about three quarters of sales organizations have one sales process. When I've got a prospect, this is what I do with them. Well, you can't do that with every prospect. So, you know, the idea of having at least two sales processes, and I'm going to split them very fast and move some into this Christmas card list, kind of keep them warm process, and this one into the high touch process. The vast majority, 75% of companies that in our samples, it was about 78, I think, don't do that. So, you know, it's hardly any wonder that they can't establish those deeper relationships and get the data.
Patricia, can we hear from the marketing perspective before we move on to the next topic?
Yes. So the bridge between having a product produced or a service introduced and reaching out to the consumer is actually through engagement. And be it from the consumer, B2B or B2C, it still comes through engagement. And today, really 80% of our sales volumes are coming from 20% of our customers. It means that the consistent engagement and knowing these specific customers so well is actually driving the business growth. If your network is not as strong as it should be, maintaining even this 20% of the customers to deliver your 80% of sales will be a problem. So yes, to a very large extent, networking is good. When coming to businesses, big FMCGs like the Unilevers and the Nestle's, it goes beyond that, of course. You have to use the data. Here is the trick. When the data is a lot and is not interconnected or automated, that is where the frustrations start. Everything gets scattered in your head and you choose to focus on your key objective or the project. And that's where the sales team get disconnected from the marketing team, because then you are just focusing on something that is bringing your sales volume and your target, and that's it. When marketing is even looking beyond just your sales volume today.
Go on, Marcus.
Again, I understand where Patricia's coming from. A question that's been bothering me for so long now is why are so many of our processes in sales and marketing so broken, where we accept an 80% failure rate as a baseline, and you know, in most of our motions are actually north of 95, 97%. That there is a really powerful approach, which is actually speak to customers. So I want to build on what both Gavin and Chris have said there, which is that we need to interview actual human beings who have bought our product, who have fired us, and try and find out what it is that causes them to buy, and understand that that journey starts weeks, months, even years before.
Absolutely.
We need to really focus our attention on that, because that's what the customer is doing. And to build on Sarah's point, we have to adapt to how consumers are changing. And to build on Patricia's point, what we really have to focus on is measuring the right stuff. So what I would countenance here is that what we should be asking ourselves is, well, wherever we have a system that has north of 60% failure rate, ask, where is this being done better? And then ask how they do it. Because God knows there are enough examples of people with 70% close rates at the final stage, 90% close rates at the final stage, because they've done the right stuff earlier. So that's me said.
Sorry, Marcus, just to touch on that. I mean, we've had this this idea of this: the customers are the innovators, and you know, that we should interview and follow the customers. Now, I think there's always a line between this. I mean, because I've experienced this on the other side, where I've had a couple of customers who've come to me, and you know, initially they're struggling because they've got a problem. They get me in there in the organization. They start to see a bit of change, and all of a sudden they forget that a few months ago that they had this problem, and then they start to say they want to push you into a situation where they're saying, "Okay, look, we've done it for years this way, and it was working. We want you to now do it this way, Leon." I'm like, "Hang on. 2-3 months ago, you had a problem. You called me in as a specialist because you couldn't deal with the problem. Now I've come in and I've changed the approach, and I'm now doing it a different way." Why?
Okay, so what's your question?
At what stage do you draw the line and say no? Look.
Well, I mean, you say no if what they're asking you to do means you have to behave out of integrity instead of within integrity. If you don't think it's the right thing for them, you have an obligation to tell them. But what I would suggest is preempt that. If that's something that happens repeatedly, then why not lead with, in about 3 months' time, when these problems have evaporated because we've eliminated them at their cause, you're probably going to come back and you're going to ask to regress. And you're going to say, you know, Leon, what I really want to do is I want to go back to the stuff that we used to do, which wasn't working. When that happens, are you okay that I punch you on the nose and then double my fee? Yeah, just wake them up to it.
Yeah,
okay, because you may as well be burning your money if you do that. So can we agree now that when that happens, I can slap you? Yeah, just make sure that they know there is a very definitive line in the sand. Gavin may have a slightly different view, but people don't come to me for love and hugs and cuddles.
No, I don't actually, Marcus. I've made quite a lot of notes as you've gone through, and I think one of the challenges here, because I agree with everything. I think we're all broadly in agreement. There's not much row here. We all agree on strategy and mindset. There's maybe a few behavioural differences slightly, but there's some interesting points to be made, because I think you've got to be able to carry this dichotomy in your head. You know, you've got to be able to carry two things in your head at the same time to be successful, to be truly successful. So, for example, Sarah talked about TripAdvisor, and she talked about people buying online, and that's right. You need to be able to understand what processes people are following. But conversely, you know, if you look old school at Challenger Sale and things like that, you've got to be able to also challenge clients around their processes, because just because somebody does something some way and they think that's the way to do it does not mean, in fact, invariably, it often means that they haven't got the best process because they've decided on a set process. And we've got to bear in mind that Patricia said 20% of sales come from, 80% of sales come from 20% of clients. We also have the figure that it's actually not 80-20, is it? It's 87-13, I believe. 87% of business comes from 13% of the salespeople. And the interesting thing is that that is a more useful statistic in some ways, because what that demonstrates, let's be honest, is that the vast majority of salespeople are journeyman nonsense. They've no idea what they're doing, they've not been trained properly, and they don't add enough value. So if clients are consistently faced with salespeople who don't and can't add value, then they don't appreciate what a great salesperson can do. So for me, the answer here is it's more cream and more jam. But how do you deliver the jam when no one's putting jam on stuff anymore because people are scared of it? And I think the answer is knowing who your clients are perfectly so that you know you can add value for those people. And then having the boldness, the courage, and coupling that with humility and discipline to go in and actually challenge to have these conversations and challenge to bend their processes a little bit. And I think that's the bit where people fall down, because we get sucked into what people want to do and how they want to do it. And we're a little bit too scared sometimes to challenge and say, you know, TripAdvisor being a great example. TripAdvisor is great. But interestingly, TripAdvisor also thinks that the best restaurant in Bradford is a fish and chip shop. Also, TripAdvisor, a man got himself to #1 in central London, working from his garage with no. It's a great video if anybody wants to go and find it. Half an hour on how a guy got to top of TripAdvisor, doesn't even have a restaurant. It was his garage. So I think we've got to be able to challenge that to prove that we are different and that we deal with a certain client. And then that's where I then 100% agree with Marcus, Chris, and Patricia, Sarah. I think then you use that data in a clever way to demonstrate and add value to their processes. And I think that's what people are not doing at the moment. I think you had your hand up there, Patricia.
Yeah, go on.
Yes, and really, this is where our expertise come through. You've been called out of people to come and help solve a problem. It means that they trust something about you. The moment you realize that your presence is not really making any change, you have to face it as bold as possible. And I do that all the time, especially to my SMEs. You know, sometimes it's as if the reality is hitting them and they are refusing to even accept the weaknesses. So I keep highlighting the issues why you called me all the time, in order for you to not just scare you, but for you to realize and keep at it, to say, this is why I'm here. Do you want me to solve the problem? Or I should just leave you to it? And the moment I do it frequently, you realize that they are appreciating your. I tell you what, I had a training for a certain group of people who've had like 10 years of marketing experience, etc. Apparently, one of the team leaders was like, what else am I going to listen to? I mean, I know everything about my customers and I know my marketing and all of that. After the training, the guy was like, oh, so I was wrong. Then I said, the only thing I needed you to come into this room is a mindset to change or grow. If you didn't have it, we all don't need to be in this room. And consistently, we need to drive this as bold as possible.
Okay. Sorry. Just before we move on, I just wanted to, Marcus, you mentioned a point earlier about, and I think it's quite relevant, where you said that salespeople, we're not building relationships anymore. And I think that this is a very important point, because this is meant to be, for me, the whole point of sales. We're building relationships, we're gaining trust, and we're finding that information. Now, how can we change this status quo?
Well, the first thing is we have to think about how the behavior is being created. The culture and the values of the investors and the money behind the organization permeate the culture of the organization. And it goes through leadership, through their long-term compensation and what and how they measure and who they recruit, through management and what they measure, what they obsess about, and whether or not they're capable of management. Because whilst it's only 13% of salespeople, there was a 2019 study that Jonathan Farrington did that suggested that only 6% of sales managers were fit for purpose. Now, that is an even bigger problem, but it's a massive opportunity, and we should be looking at that data. That's the really interesting data, because if we teach managers that they should be investing in relationships and focused on the medium term so that salespeople actually have a chance to develop a relationship with many people in an organization over time and fit with the trust equation that Charlie Green developed. Trust equals credibility, which is you can do what you say you can, reliability, which means you do it in the manner that you said you would, to the tune you said you would, to the budget you said you would, and the time frame. And the most important factor there is intimacy. They let you in and they trust you enough to share confidences, and so do you, vice versa. But that is all over low self-orientation. That's how you build trust. It's through actually focusing on the other person. And my definition of selling, which I stole from someone, and I can't remember who I should credit, but I'm very grateful, is selling is the facilitation of buying. It's as simple as that. Our job is to help the customer make the best possible decision for themselves, for now and the future, whether it involves us being in the final cut or not.
I think that's a very important point, Marcus, because since I've been, doing sales, I can't remember any occasion where I've never hit my target, but I've always built relationships, good solid relationships with my customers, regardless of whatever pressure is on me externally from any boss or any manager. So do we think it's fair to blame the managers or put this all on
I'm not trying to
managers?
blame anyone, but what I do want is for managers to be capable and not set up to fail. I'm working with one manager at the moment who's been set an impossible task because he's working with a bunch of investors who have got this growth target, which they picked from the air, and they've now thrown him that target. Meanwhile, the market's contracting and they're not adapting or changing. He's now got to work 17-hour days and sweat blood to do this. Why? Because they've got a valuation target. Who cares about the valuation target? Why not look after your people? Because after all, you've just spent a small fortune, probably the price of a mortgage, hiring them. Then you have to run them, pay them and train them. And then you blow them out the back door because you burn them out and you treat them like crap. Enough. Just start treating people.
It's a perfect storm.
Well.
It's a perfect storm. It's a perfect storm, isn't it? In answer to your question, Leon, you've got clients who are overly focused on data and are really interested in all the exciting, sexy stuff that they're being sold. Leaders who are being asked to count and check that data over relationships, and salespeople who are more than happy to do that because actually the way society has moved, they don't necessarily want to be making those pesky, difficult cold calls and things like that. So you end up with this almost perfect storm of people all supporting each other in this route, which isn't a bad route. As everybody said, I think it just misses the piece that would add the true value to it, which is, the salespeople building those intimate relationships that is necessary for the equation Marcus was talking about a moment ago. I can't remember who that was. Who did you say it was, Marcus? Would you
Charlie Green. He wrote The Trusted Advisor and one of the best books on sales called Trust-Based Selling. If you haven't read it, read it, digest it, apply it.
Okay. All right.
It seems to me that just taking a step back, we have different ideas of how to add value, what's going wrong, things that if you're not doing it, you should try doing it this way or try doing it that way. All of this is good, but you need to be doing it in the context of a system. By system, I mean not a rigid process. The system, by definition, means let's work out what good is and let's measure if we're getting good. And if we are, let's do more of that. If not, let's carry on experimenting. So constant experiment, room to experiment, measure, and understand what's working, and do more of that. So a sales system that accommodates that rather than a rigid sales process. This is how we do it here, right? If you haven't got that system, if you're not able to understand what good looks like, if you're measuring the wrong things, to Marcus's point, you're not going to be able to know when you're improving and how to.
The only caveat I would have with that, or argument I would have with that, Chris, is that I think people over-rely on having a sales methodology, which they then stamp on the customer because we want to put them through our process. And I think what we have to do is really start paying more attention to the buyer's buying process.
Absolutely.
And make sure that we turn up at relevant points where they are struggling on that journey, and turn up and deliver value consistently and not be in a hurry. We've got to be patient. The best salespeople I know have a massive tolerance for incredibly boring, repetitive work, and they are incredibly patient.
Yeah, I think that was something that I would second that as well. I think, there is always a sales system. Organizations have to be built on a system. Yeah, and you can't get away from that. But I think it's the salesperson's job and their responsibility to adapt that system and take out and to create a niche between that system and their own persona and the buyer's persona as well.
There is always a process. There's not always a system. There's a process, which is your point. And my point is the process needs to be constantly changing and adapting when it hits reality. That makes it a system. A system looks for the feedback and changes the process. So that's my beef. Too much process, not enough system.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah. Okay, we've had a couple of questions here. Let's tackle some of these questions here because we've got 30 minutes remaining, and then I want to spend the last 15 minutes just summarizing and then actually bringing together some clear-cut sheets of how we or advice that we can give audience. Yeah, so questions that you guys have to answer, if you could please go with those. If you could tell the question first and then answer. Gavin, Sarah, do you want to go? Not Gavin, sorry, Chris, Sarah. Who's ready?
Yeah, I can start with that. So we have a question from Preetha. Thank you, Preetha. Is it important for salespeople to grow their social capital? We are not dealing with robots, but humans with emotions. And desire change, feelings change. So it's the personal connects and your social capital that helps in switching the approach swiftly. So I can definitely talk to that. And I think others in the room would love to too. I'm an ex-nurse, and those on this stage with me know that I'm all about the human elements when it comes to sales. And I think if we go back to what's just been discussed, we're brought up being taught treat others as the way you would like to be treated. But actually, we don't want to be selling to others the way we want to be sold to. And I think too many sellers are allowing that to get in their way. And as they start to build their social networks, as they get out there networking, they're allowing their own buying behaviors to get into the way of how they sell without really understanding the other human being in the interaction, or human beings. If you're in large enterprise sales, you're going to have multiple buyers involved in that complex process. But there's a couple of things on that. So one is, the use of your social space, and I'm talking digital there. I think there's a lot of people, and if you look at platforms like LinkedIn, that are using it as a pitch platform rather than somewhere to add value and build relationships with individuals. And the people you see doing well on the platform, and if I speak to a seller and ask how many of your leads last week or last month came from your social media activity or your social selling activity, the ones that say yes are not the people sitting behind automated LinkedIn pitch platform tools. They're the ones that are out there adding value on a consistent basis and, really getting to know people across the platforms. And the point I made about TripAdvisor earlier was not to allow a TripAdvisor situation to keep going, but the importance of third-party validation. So if you're going to put emphasis into your social space, then you need to make sure there's third-party validation in there for the buyer's journey. So it's not just about how amazing you say you are, but it's what do other people say about you. And our buyers are not expecting perfection. Marcus kindly, through his podcast, introduced me to Todd Capone over the course of the past year. And if you look at some of the work Todd's done in the research on, people are not looking for 5 out of 5. They're looking at 4.2 to 4.5. They're not looking for perfection. They want us to be honest. They want us to come out there and say, this is where I got it wrong, guys. This is what I learned from it. And this is how I can now add more value. So as you're building your social space, your social interactions, your network, give it all. Don't just focus on how amazing you are and pitch people until they give up on you. Over and out. Hopefully that was helpful.
Brilliant. That was great. Anybody else want to comment on that before we move to the next question?
Well, certainly to the point of admitting your failures, let's say, one of the most powerful things, going back to these very large complex accounts and managing the account planning process, if you can identify, and frankly you can in every single account, if you can identify somewhere where the customer is a bit pissed off with you haven't fixed an issue, there's a lingering problem. And when I interview the customer prior to doing the workshop, the customer will say, well, they should be bloody talking about this thing because they still haven't fixed it. And I go into the workshop and I say, guys, your customer's talking about this issue. And invariably, the account manager will say, still going on about that. We fixed that 6 months ago. What, we've got to move on and talk about this other stuff. And by focusing the team on the issue that the customer is insisting needs to be fixed, all you have to do is address the customer's problem, admit where you went wrong or whatever the deal is, and that opens up the floodgates. If you fixed a problem for the customer, you can move the relationship on much faster. So it works on all sorts of levels. This idea of understanding your fallibility, admitting to your fallibility, and addressing the problems. So,
this is very interesting. It's followed on from a debate that we had on with Marcus on social media the other day, and I was surprised by how many people don't ask for feedback, for critical feedback. And it's not this kind of stroking your ego. Oh yeah, how well did I do? No. What did I do wrong? How could I improve? And I think that is, a really serious question, guys. And every salesperson should be asking that. I weave that into all of my contracts that whenever I finish a project, the customer has to do a 1 hour feedback session with me, and it's a critical feedback. I can stroke my own ego. I can tell myself I'm good all the time. I don't need anybody to prop me up that way. But what I do need to know is, where am I going wrong? How can I improve, and how can I better serve them or the next customer? Yeah. Okay. If nobody's got anything more to say on that, Chris, I would like to Reg Staffstrom's question, the one about the data.
Sorry.
Well, Marcus, while he's finding that, if you go on.
Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Go on there, Chris, if you got it.
All right, I think I found it. So Red's saying, when we're talking about the right data to follow, do you think that it's static across all sales processes, or it depends on the business? Well, yeah, clearly every business is different, and they're going to be looking at different data that they should be registering as part of their system. What I was talking about before, if you want to be able to adjust your sales processes to improve them, you need to be measuring something and working out and experimenting and working out what works and what doesn't. So every business is going to be different in terms of the data that they're measuring. We certainly know, for example, especially on complex sales, but frankly for any sales process, if you can answer a set of qualification questions by observing your customer, so it's based on customer engagement and what you can see your customer doing, you're answering the qualification questions. We know that can be an extremely powerful tool, A, to be asking the right things of your customer, and B, to win the deal at the end of it. It's a very good forecasting tool. But every single sales process, every customer is different, every business and what they're trying to sell is going to be looking for different things. So we know that it's a very, very powerful technique to get your salespeople together and say, okay, what should our qualification questions be? And more to the point, instead of saying on a scale of 1 to 5, how do we judge this prospect? You should be saying, what does a 2 look like? What does a 3 look like? Because it gives you a chance to exchange information amongst your sales team as to the response that you're seeing from your customers, and knowing what the right signals are to be able to move ahead with the sales process. So in terms of qualification questions, it's a very, very powerful thing to tailor it to every single business, the selling business, I mean, right? So yes, I think the quick answer to Red's question is yes, the data varies across every, different sales organizations should be measuring different things and looking for different things. That's it.
Cool.
Okay, brilliant. Marcus, you want to do the last question?
Red's question?
Yeah.
So in terms of dealing with the 6% worthy manager stat, I think the best solution is to teach managers how to become operational coaches. What this means is that they coach on the job, in the moment, at the point of need, based on what they see in the real world. And they stop faffing around pretending that they don't have time for coaching. The reason you don't have time for coaching, let me be absolutely blunt, is you're not coaching. If you coached, and in fact, there's some really interesting data that one of my clients has generated. They've been working with the London School of Economics, and they've worked with 62 companies sponsored by the UK government. And what they found was that managers who started implementing operational coaching as a day-to-day behavior increased their capacity to do high value behaviors instead of focus on low value activity like doing and controlling and micromanaging. They've now they've recovered 1 day a week on average, and managers now spend 70% more time on coaching. 23% less time on managing, as in hands-on stuff, and 10% less time doing. Now, that frees up a huge amount of time to spend on retaining people, on looking after them, on going on ride-alongs, on all of that stuff that they're just not doing at the moment. And when you do, performance goes through the roof. With these organizations, 62 of them, academically verified, they got an average of a 72x return on investment. For every pound they spent, they got 72 pounds back, documented by the end customers at the management level. Okay, that's what you do with managers. You train them to actually do their job instead of becoming a function of audit.
Do you think that training should just be left to the managers?
No, I think training should be brought in from all sorts of places. I think you should be talking to your customers. Why aren't customers involved in training? That's insane that you don't involve customers in your training. Why are partners not involved in training? Why is it that all the stakeholders, users, are never actually spoken to about what they actually need in the field? Because no one pays any attention to them.
One of the things that I do quite often whenever I go into a organization we're doing training, I always set up a buddy system, so you get the experienced peoples to coach and mentor and do peer-to-peer training to help the younger junior staff, because the experienced guys are the ones that know what the objections are, they're knowing what the problems are, they're the ones that know how to deal with the customers. Sarah, you said an example of training, just to round this up, and then we summarize.
So we do a lot of work in energy, and I've recently had conversations with a large oil and gas operator, well-known brand, and they've asked us to go in and facilitate training that's going to take together sellers that sell into that operator, but with the procurement teams, with the different buyers in the room. And, it's more of a workshop than training, but to really get them communicating and to set a sales ethos for the company of, when you sell to us, this is what we're expecting and this is what we're not expecting. But really for everyone to be part of that conversation before that's set out. And that's the first time I've ever had that approach and thought it was really interesting. So I'll let you know how it goes.
Cool. We've got a couple more minutes left before we start the summary rounds. Anybody else want anything to say? Any other comments? Okay. No. Yes, no, maybe. All right, guys. Well, I think this has been really interesting debate. What I'd like to do now is obviously I'd like to just take it to, give our audience some real tangible takeaways from this debate to summarize. So going back to the question again, customers become much more data-driven, resulting in less supplier engagement. How are business combating this to sustain growth? My question, I would like you all to give me at least 1 point from your perspective. How would you advise customers or your businesses to utilize this debate or utilize something from here and to actually move forward to help them through this recession and something that they can change?
Okay.
My point would be the critical feedback. Guys, everything we should be asking for critical feedback, finding out what we're doing wrong, how can we improve, and utilizing that information to solidify relationships and improving ourselves moving forward. Okay, Patricia, do you want to ask next? Do you want to respond?
Yes. So yes, quality customer service delivery is key for me, and it's quite broad. Of course, you have to conduct your surveys, like we've all said, trying to understand the customer journey, etc., so that you can offer that value solution for the customer. And like to your point, you keep listening and take feedback. Sometimes how people give feedback can be tough to receive, but we need to know we are humans and we are not perfect. And getting feedback does not necessarily mean the other person is saying is also entirely the truth, because they are also giving you their perspective. But you need to be ready and willing and very empty to listen to feedback. Again, with delivering the customer service, you need to build that customer-centered culture. Let everything you do and say be built around the customer. Why are you in the business today? It is not for your sake, not for your family's sake, but it is for somebody. From your conversations to your execution should be all around the customer. If the customer says no, find a way to still please the customer. And you do this by mapping or defining their journey so well. In the long run, you are creating customer intimacy. And I think Marcus mentioned that earlier. You need to find that way, create that intimacy, whichever way. Managing difficult customers is one key thing that I'm trying to train some customers, some clients on this week. But we need to find that intimacy coming through with strong networking.
That was brilliant. Thank you for that. Customer intimacy. I love that point. Marcus, what's your point? What would your advice be?
My advice is be human. Stop trying to transact. Stop trying to book meetings. To actually turn up and listen. Have a conversation with somebody about something that matters to them. Get into their world. Zach Selt said something very profound, which I would absolutely recommend people pay attention to, which is that your job is to enter into the prospect's world and their workflow in a way that is unique and original and provokes them to think about their role in a different way. And if you can do that, because no one else has done it for them and they've never thought of it, that instantly positions you as somebody who they should pay attention to. And our job is to make them create the conditions where they feel safer with us beside them on their buying journey than without us. And in order to do this, we really have to up our game. I'm going to be absolutely blunt. What passes for average in sales is atrocious. Sales should be the most noble thing we do in our business. It is the facilitation of the best decisions that are going to make the difference between survival and thriving. and could mean the difference between their livelihood or you getting a deal. So if I turn up to a CFO who's responsible for $1 billion business, their time is worth $250,000 an hour. If I'm not turning up with $250,000 worth of value because I've prepared, I planned, I've rehearsed, I've thought about their issues, I've done my research, I've thought about provocative questions, I've thought about who needs to be involved, and I've done my homework, so when I turn up, I give them real value. That's what I think we should be really focusing on, and that's what managers should be contemplating, realizing their job is to help create the conditions so their salespeople can do that freely and not be scrabbling around, pulling deals forward from next quarter to satisfy some speculator, and give up the idea that anyone comes to work to make their rich investors richer. The idea that we come in to serve shareholder value is utter hogwash. There you go. Made no friends of VCs.
Marcus, thank you. Chris, go on, take it away.
Yeah, well, I think we're all broadly, furiously in agreement that what's needed here is the human element. It needs the human connection. It needs to build those relationships and to work with that. My recommendation is a very practical way of how to create the space in which you can do that. Because the main battle, the main enemy of salespeople is they're working within a process that doesn't allow the space to do that. In order to create the space, my recommendation is, number one, grab yourselves a very large number of prospects. Ideally, split your territory up into manageable chunks and go for 100% of your target market in any one territory. Get a database of all of those prospects. Why 100%? Because then you can start getting some statistics on that. You can get some useful information from it, as opposed to a mailing list that you don't know how it was created and it's probably covering only 50% of the market. So 100% of the target market. And then you need to split that list down very, very fast in an efficient and productive way into at least 2 streams, not one sales process, at least 2, maybe more. On one of them, the biggest, the fattest one, you're going to be putting that onto some sort of a drip marketing campaign. We can discuss what you do with that. But it's the other ones that you have identified as being worthy of your high touch process and your attention, so that you've created the space for you now to work with this smaller list of prospects and to go through the high touch process. The other point I'd make is this is a system, it's not a process. The difference between a process and a system is that you're looking for something to measure, get feedback, experiment, and improve the process constantly, a constant improvement as you go through this. The qualification that you do with each customer, with each deal, you're looking for signals from the customer in terms of their engagement. And you're going through a regular questionnaire with every single customer that you do. You're not asking the customer these questions, you're asking yourself these questions. What do I know about my customer? What don't I know about my customer? And therefore I need to find more information about. And if you regularly go through such a questionnaire and log your answers, and then you can, software can very easily compare those answers to your win-losses and do an analysis on this, you get a very, very powerful way of understanding whether you're on track and whether your forecasting is working all right. So this all forms part of the system, which is getting feedback and data to improve your process. But the key point is you need to use a system to carve out the space for you to have that interaction and get the information from your customer. If you're suffocating in a process that doesn't allow that space, there's something wrong. And the way to create that space is to push to one side all of those prospects that are not worthy at this prima facie, are not worthy of your attention right now, but we're not going to ignore them completely. We're going to put them on some other drip campaign and come back to them, looking for a signal that we should bring them into this high touch process. So at least 2 streams and the ability to move between them. And the vast majority of companies are not doing this today.
And I think that what I'd like to second to that is that further to what Marcus said earlier, is that there are many ways nowadays to target people, and I think different people, if we're thinking about the buyer's process, I think sales leaders, one thing that I've learned from this is that sales leaders need to adopt different processes for the different sales personas and to accommodate the different buyers and their different buyers processes. And I think we need to be flexible as leaders to do that. Gavin, you give us your point, please, and then Sarah, we finish off with you.
Sure. I think we need to remember that data, sales enablement tools, technology, all of these things were creative to improve what we were already doing, not to replace it. And I think this idea that you throw the jam out to slap cream on is just ridiculous. And I think we've got to work out how we bring the two together to do more. And I think there's three things that have leapt out to me while we've been having this conversation. The first one, which is probably, given we're all in broad agreement, is probably the most contentious, is I think you have to have a desire to lead. And what I mean by that is that if all you do is look at the processes that your companies are currently using for buying, you are going to be the same as everybody else. So I think you need to know who your perfect client is, how you add value, which brings me to two. I think you need to know how you're going to lead, what is that module you're going to lead with, but I think you need to be prepared to challenge. Marcus talked about provocative questions. 100% agreed with him, but you're going to have to challenge to even get in to ask some of those provocative questions, because the clients think they don't want it. Leaders don't necessarily want it. Sales don't necessarily want to do it. And we've got to get in there and we've got to do that. And then I think the third thing, which again is something that came from Marcus and something I fully agree with, I think you need a passion for adding value. And that idea, the one stat, and I've heard Marcus talk about this before, that one stat of if you're sitting in front of somebody who's earning $1 billion, is running £1 million business, how much value you need to be able to bring to that 45 minutes. That is something that salespeople do not do and cannot do. So for me, it's leading, it's challenging, and it's adding value. They're the three things we need to do for me.
Gavin, brilliant. Thank you very much. Sarah, if we could just round off with you.
Okay, so I agree with everything that's been said, and going last means I'm crossing stuff off my list. So what I have left is two things. So first of all is don't underestimate the network and the relationships you already have. I find that people in sales are always looking at new, let's target, let's go here, market entry. But actually, who do you already know? Who have you already done business with? When we look at sales enablement, there's a lot of relationship intelligence tools, and I have been gobsmacked at how many links have been created that businesses didn't even know they had. The same at a personal level, who are you already connected to? Who can be clients? Yes, but who can you partner with? Who can you collaborate with? Who can you focus on building valuable relationships with that are going to help you through this difficult period ahead? And Marcus just got an idea, I think. The second point, we've spoken a lot about how can we improve and change as businesses, and Chris spoke to, the need for a more in-depth sales process and qualification. But also, what can we do? So, the people listening to this, whether you're in small business, big business, you're a salesperson, a manager, a leader, I think that need for self-awareness, and we talked about feedback, but how many of us are looking at our own competency, our own behavior, our own mindset, and looking at where are we today and what do we need to do to develop to become better? Where are we getting in our own way? What do we need to learn, whether that is, podcasts, books, training courses, coaching, but, put something into action. Don't just keep going, with whatever you're doing right now, or you're not going to improve. So I think we need to take personal responsibility in always looking to develop and move forward.
Okay, guys, listen, Marcus, quickly.
Let me finish on a bit of a bombshell question. Yeah. The thing that's fascinated me, and all of us is spending a lot of time talking to clients about their data and about their tech stack and about their salespeople. Well, my question is this: why, in the last 7 years, has average quota attainment halved, while we've had this explosion of data, this explosion of technology, this huge influx of cash. Generally, what I've seen is a lot of stupid money has been thrown into chasing vanity metrics because they've been chasing the headline fad. And they've forgotten that the technology should actually be there as a way of helping the salespeople, the human beings, get the job done. And I think what we've forgotten is that we should be creating a partnership between the technology, the data, and the human beings, so that the customers get a better outcome and a better experience, and the employees feel more engaged, because that generates more profit, which is far more sustainable. But I do have that question. Why is it we're accepting this massive explosion in investment in technology whilst quota performance has halved? Because that seems to me to be counter to the objective.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, and if you want to hear the answer to that question, tune in at 3 o'clock CET for where Marcus and hopefully the rest of the guys here will be sitting here in the networking session in group 1, taking live questions from you guys. Yeah. Thank you very much for your time, guys. Thank you all speakers for joining. It was a really great debate. We're going to have a 10-minute break now, and we're going to join back again at 10:40 to receive the next debate session. Yeah? Okay.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.